Hello, Joe Pesci from Prometheus here. It's a pretty grotty day outside, so I thought today might be a good day to actually start doing a little bit of whittling. So obviously you can see I've got a dust sheet out. I'm going to go through all the tools and the other cuts, but hopefully we'll do a couple of 10-minute sessions just using how to do safe cutting techniques and stuff, and then we might then on another video do some more elaborate spoon carving. So yeah, I'll just show you bits and pieces that we've got lined out here that you can. So this first one here, this is called a tri-stick. Each one of these has got a different purpose. Each one of these cuts has got a different purpose. It's actually an idea suggested by Morse Kachansky, who is the grandfather of bushcraft and whittling skills. My son decided to use it as a smashing stick, so I actually snapped it in half this morning, so I'm quite upset about that. This is my walking stick. This is actually a bit of not hazel, it's silver birch, but when ivy or clematis grows up the tree, it makes these kind of spiral marks which look quite nice. You can carve them out. I've turned it into a little snake stick. So this is my walking stick. I've carved a Prometheus into the main section of it. Letter openers, again, just embellished it with a little cockerel's head on the bottom there. Some soap trays, or maybe an olive bowl. Elder you can use to make whistles out of. That's a whistle. Magic wands. I like my owls, so I've got a little owl butter knife there and a little owl totem. This is a practical spoon. So this is what I'd like us to do. This all needs a good sanding and a good finishing. I just haven't had time to be able to do it. So that's Rose love spoon, just another love spoon, and then this is the one I did for my partner, which is actually finished. So this is oiled and sanded nicely, so they all really should be looking like that. Now I'm on lockdown, I will get to sanding and oiling. So some of the kit that you're going to need. You're going to need a decent knife. Now you might not have a decent knife at home. You might have one of these Leathermans. They've got a locking blade inside them, which is just here. So it locks in place when you open it. So that would be okay. Anything like this, when you're whittling for a long period of time, it's actually going to hurt your hands because it's quite clunky. So you can buy single bladed fixed blade knives, these tiny little ones here. It's got a little piece of metal there, and that locks the blade in place. You have to press it to release it. It's quite handy to have one of these locking blades in place, because it's a lot safer to use a fixed blade or a locking blade than it is to use just a normal pen knife. It won't lock down on your fingers when you're using it, which is quite good. Just bear in mind that any fixed blades, like that one, and even my big Moore knife, these are illegal to carry in a public place in England. So it doesn't matter about the size, and this is only a tiny little one, but it's got a lock, and now you've got to press that metal to release it. So this is classed as a fixed blade offensive weapon. If you're carrying this in a public place, you can get a £10,000 fine and or up to 4 years imprisonment. So you just need to be careful you're not carrying these around in public places. If you're on your own land or in private, that's fine. But if you are going to go and wanting to do a little bit of normal whittling, then a little folding knife like this, a Swiss Army knife, as long as it doesn't lock in place and as long as the blade is under 3 inches, you can legally carry that in a public place with good reason. Okay, so walking around the supermarkets on a Saturday afternoon with this in your pocket is not a good reason for you to have it. But if you're going out doing bushcraft, or you're out in the woods, you know, you're a dog walker or anything like that, you're legally allowed to take one of these little folding knives with you. You will need a saw of some description. I'll talk about the safe cutting techniques. This is a real cheap one, actually. I bought this from Asda, £4. I normally use a Laplander, Barco Laplander, but can't find it at the minute. It's probably in my van, so I'm not going to go down there if I've already got this upstairs. So this is just a folding blade. Again, it needs to have a lock on it, and you want it locked, because obviously you don't want that coming down your hand when you're using them. And I will go into the safe cutting techniques of how to use one of these folding saws, but you can just use a fixed saw. That's not a problem. Just follow the guidelines I'm going to show you. These smaller little upper nail knives, they're really handy for doing detailed work. Some of them are locking, some of them aren't. These are quite nice little knives. There's a whole series of them. Some of them don't lock, so the smaller ones don't lock. The slightly bigger upper nail ones, they will lock. They've got a little twist cap on the top there, which will lock it in place, which means that would be classed as a fixed blade, but that one won't. But like I said, for doing small detail, very fine work, like in your spoons here, having a smaller knife will be easier. But to be fair, I've done most of my carving with just this one knife. It's a Mora companion. They only cost about between £8 and £10. Again, I've got the Bushcraft version, which costs about £30. It's in the van. But yeah, any of these little knives are absolutely fine. Mora, it's a company from Sweden. They're really good knives. This is a half tang, which means that the blade comes down halfway down to the handle, and ideally what you want is a full tang, so the blade goes right the way through the handle to the very end. That makes it incredibly strong, and you'll see we're going to be hitting these knives with pieces of wood, so it needs to have a bit of strength in it. And that's the other trouble with these pen knives, because there's a folding part there. Sometimes they'll snap off there, so ideally for doing carving, whittling, you want a full tang knife. Other things are not essential, but they're handy. So this is a crook knife. This is used for scooping out bowls, doing the main part in here. Again, I can show you how to use them. You don't have to have one of these. If you haven't got one, which is highly likely that you haven't, you can just use a knife, and I'll show you how to use a knife to be able to gouge out bowls. Obviously, a mixture of sandpaper is essential. And I've got some other things. These are little gouges, so again, these are for doing embellishings and other things that you can use, which are really handy. These diamond files, needle files, and they'll come in all different shapes, so they're good for doing little embellishments on your wood as well. All of my kit needs a really good clean. I'm a filthy bushcrafter. It's disgusting. Just when you're teaching these courses, you hardly ever get any time to look after your own kit, really. The other thing that's helpful as well is some kind of oil, polishing oil. So Danish oil is really good stuff to use. It's food safe, so whenever you're looking on the back, just make sure that you can use it for food stuffs, because obviously if you're using spoons, you're going to give it to somebody that's going to be going into somebody's mouth. So just make sure that the oil that you're using is food safe. Danish oil is, and a cloth. Good. So there's lots of different types of wood that you can use for carving. What you're looking for is something that's pretty straight grained and relatively soft to work with. So woods like oak and beech, they can be quite hard, difficult to work, especially for beginners. So a nice soft wood like hazel, willow, rhododendron, lime and sweet chestnut, they're all really good. If you're not sure what they look like, I will be covering a lot of these trees when I do my foraging talks, but you can always Google search them, and you can find them on there. Once you've cut your section, now obviously you need to be careful when you're taking wood from the wild. You can't be cutting down people's ornamental trees, but you might have some wood in your garden. Also a good thing to do is to speak to gardeners and people working conservation, and they might have sections of wood that they'll be happy to give you. When you've taken your piece of wood, for doing spoons and small things, we're really looking for a nice straight piece of wood that's about 1 inch in diameter. Try and get it as straight as possible. This is dogwood, so this has got a beautiful colour to it. If you can see, it's got a yellow sapwood, which is the outside bit, and then a pink heartwood, which makes really nice carving. Gives it a nice range of different colours when you're going through the different layers. This is a little bit too dry, so I cut this over a month ago. When you've cut your wood, you need to leave it to season, so dry out, air dry, for at least 2 weeks. Otherwise, when you're carving it, if you don't get the project done in one go, what will happen, it will start to start to split. So if you can see this wood here, it hasn't dried evenly at the same time. The outside has actually dried a lot quicker than the heartwood in the middle, and that's when you start getting these cracks and checks. So leave it to season for at least 2 weeks. Even better if you paint the ends with glue or paint, just the ends that have been cut. That will stop it from doing things like this and checking and splitting. So find yourself a nice straight piece. So what we're looking for is about a 6 to 8 inch section, which is going to be easy to work. So I'm going to use this section here in the middle here, and I'm just going to cut off where these knots are. So we don't really want these knots, these inclusions here in the wood, because they will be quite difficult for you to carve through, because obviously the wood's growing in a different direction, and this is where branches used to come out. When you're looking for a piece of wood, it will normally tell you what it wants to be. So say for example this piece of wood here, yeah, it's got some knots in it, but we can cut those off. But this looks like it wants to be a ladle. So that's the handle, curves down like that, and it's going to come back up like here. So that's quite nice. That's something that I'll probably do at another time using this to make a little ladle out of. So when you're sawing, it's really important. I mean, I'm using a block here. You can use a chair, anything that you don't really care about, because the chances are you might get cuts in it. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to hold the saw in my right hand, and I'm going to put my knee to hold the wood in place. Now people, when they saw, they want to saw like that. The trouble with sawing like this is that saws have a tendency of jumping out of the cut, and 9 times out of 10 they'll go towards your hand. So instead of putting your hand here when you're sawing, if you put your hand the other side when you saw, if the saw jumps out, it's not going to cut you. So if you notice, I'm trying to saw very, very straight in a straight line. If you start to bend the saw, it will pinch in the cut. And that's another reason why if you push down on the cut like that, you can see it opens up the cut, which makes it easier for you to saw through. This is what I was talking about, the colour of the wood. It's really nice. So I'm just going to do the same on this side. And here we've got a round, so this will be one of these spoons eventually, but I'm going to do something else with it first of all, just to help you get used to using your cutting techniques. Okay, so once you've got your round, you can take your knife, take it out of the sheath. Now it's really important that your knife is sharp. Okay, if your knife's not sharp, what will happen, you'll actually put more pressure down, and that's when accidents can happen. So a sharp knife is a safe knife. So I always keep it sharpened. I will do a little video on how to clean and maintain your knives and to sharpen them as well. Okay, so just be careful, of course, when children are around. I've got a 2-year-old running around, so I'm locked in the kitchen, and he's not going to be anywhere when these knives are out. He will, in a year or two. I'm going to get him to start using some knives and do some work, but a 2-year-old, I think, is a little bit too young. So take your knife out of the sheath. The most important area that you need to look after is actually this area on the inside of your leg. That's where your femoral artery is, and it's a nasty one if you accidentally cut that, because your legs can move around, it's on tension. If you cut it, it's like an elastic band, so it'll ping up inside your leg, which is quite difficult to try and treat, obviously. So whenever you're doing any whittling, if you just remember to keep your legs closed, then both of your legs are going to protect each other's femoral artery. Okay, so keep your legs closed at all time. People do get complacent after they've been whittling for about an hour or two, and they start whittling like this, and obviously that's when the accidents can happen. So just make sure you've got your legs closed whenever you're doing any whittling. I'm going to put the round up on its end. Now it's got a knot here, and I don't want that knot included in the work that I'm doing. There's no knots on the back here. So I'm going to split this wood in half and get rid of this knot in one go. So you get your knife, you hold your knife in your non-dominant hand. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to hold the knife in my left hand. I'm going to put the knife right across the top of the wood, okay, up to the hilt. So where the blade meets the handle, that's called the hilt. So I don't want it there, definitely don't want it right at the end. I want it right up to the hilt. And then you can use a piece of wood or a rolling pin, and all you're going to do is just hit the end of the knife. Once you're in there a little bit, if you apply a bit more pressure, and then just keep tapping the knife, and not even putting any, hitting it too hard, and you can open up the wood. And this is a great way of doing firewood. Like I said, you can see that this is a little bit too seasoned. Normally, if you touch it on your face, if you feel it's cold, and it normally means it's got a bit of moisture in it. So this is actually it's got a little bit of moisture in it, but it's a little bit too dry. You can leave it to soak for maybe a few hours, and that will loosen it up a little bit. But I'm quite used to carving, so I'm not going to bother with this one. So once you've split it once, I want you to split the wood again. So you're going to put it back up on its end, Put the knife over the top, just keep battering through. So this is what I was talking about with the knot. It causes problems. Okay, but this bit here, this is just going to be a little practice session for you to get to use the cuts, the safe cutting techniques properly. Okay, so once you've got your quarter, we're going to sharpen a point. There's several ways of putting a point on the end of a piece of wood. You can just sit where you are already and just carve. So it's easier if you're always carving away from yourself when you're doing this kind of work. Never try and carve towards yourself. I will show you later on a bit more advanced techniques where you can use your thumbs as locks, which is Swedish carving techniques. But for this particular demonstration, we're just going to be carving away from you. So nice straight arms. And it's better if you work on a corner, on an edge, than it is on a flat bit, because you're trying to get through too much wood by carving on a flat bit. But if you carve on an edge, it's easier to remove the wood. If you want to, you can use the stump to carve onto as well. And instead of carving like this, because you're going to wrap your knuckles on the wood, if you come to the other side of your stump, you can put quite a lot of pressure on and carve like that. If the wood gets stuck, if you just wiggle the wood, you should be able to carve through it. There's a couple more ways of carving. If you put your knee and the back of the knife against your knee, obviously not the sharp end, the back of the knife, you can pull the wood through the knife, which is a real safe carving technique, because you're not actually moving the knife at all. You're moving the wood through the knife, and you're using your shoulder muscle as opposed to your forearm muscle, so you've got a lot more strength there. There's also something called a chest push. So you're normally carving like that with a knife around this way. If you turn the knife so it's going up your arm, you can actually use both of your arms to take quite a lot of wood off, and that's really good if you're trying to get through a knot. You can also carve towards yourself on rare occasions. So if you hold the wood at the end of your the furthest extremity away from you, you can carve towards you like this. You can use your chest as well to do it, but you need to keep your elbows really close into your ribs, and that will stop your movement from going too far, and otherwise you'll carve into your chest, and that's not a good thing to do. So there's another way of doing it. Just be careful of this part of your thumb here. So what I'd like you to do, if you've never done whittling before, is just have a little go at these cutting techniques, just to carve the bark off a piece of wood and to sharpen the end. Okay, a few other cuts that you can use as well. There's something called a stop cut. So if you need to do a pattern and carve up to a pattern, if you put the wood down and you just use a battering stick to make a little cut into the wood, wherever you want it, whatever you're going to use it for, whenever you're removing the wood, if you roll it away from you like that, and then you can carve up to that stop cut. So if you see, I've got my thumb, which is a thumb push, so I'm pushing my thumb and my left hand on the back of the knife up to the stop cut. Okay, if I didn't put that stop cut in, or if I did put the stop cut in and then did just your normal whittling, quite often what will happen is you'll just go straight through your stop cut, and that's not what you want to do. You want to go up to the stop cut and then stop in place. And this is great for doing any kind of embellishments on your projects. And then if you don't know what I'm making, this is basically a really rough looking template, probably the worst one I've ever done, to be fair. There's a knot in it, it doesn't like to be in there. Of course you can leave the bark on. And then the last thing you want to do, because it's a tent peg, which means this is going to get bashed into the ground, you need to chamfer the edges all the way around, not the corners, but the actual edges right the way around. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. Thumbs in a T shape, and just take off those edges. Or alternatively, put it back down onto your stump and just carve it off like that. Now if I didn't chamfer the edges, which is what this is called, chamfering, when you bang it into the ground, what will happen is that end will either split or it will mushroom out, which was obviously going to waste your work. Worst tent peg I've ever done. There you go. Okay, so that's your first bit of work to do, learning how to do those different cuts to make the tent peg. And then after you've finished doing that, I'll show you how to make a spoon with your other half. So these are quarters, this is a half around, and this is the section of wood that you're going to be wanting to make your spoon out of.